I hate it when it forgets to record.
You could sense the main intentions of me asking, because, and this is where I know this is part of the self-mastery element to this potentially co-creative process, is to surrender things on my end how I see fit, and allow for what wants to emerge to manifest. But yeah, it's going to be a self-mastery ongoing thing for me, is to know, to discern between the two.
For everyone.
Yeah. Because I see a timeline and how it's going to manifest, where it impacts all of our lives, those who are part of Adore right now. It's going to be nested into what we call Cassiopeia, which is borderlines the Andromedan galaxy. This is where it's coming from. So it's relating to our galactic lineage. Is, you could say, the first unified micronation, if we want to say it from a technical standpoint. Because I see a nation, your 4 levels of council. I see, okay, you have the planetary, the international, which is the Council of Light, and then you have the nation level. But I see that nation level shifting into, and this is what we talked about last time, into
bioregions. Yep.
So USA.
For now, I'm just continuing to call it national because, terminology makes it easier and faster to say.
Yeah.
But yeah, bioregions. And then there's bioregions within those bioregions.
Right.
And then in my case, then we get down to the organizational level.
Yeah. So that next level, that's where I put in the unified nation, which is the state province level, providence. And then the business organizational level, the organism level, is the community level. The unified nation is a community level, and then the business level.
And so you basically had that as the same idea before you even found my content?
Yeah, 100%.
You were literally basically having the same idea that I was having.
Yeah, 100%. And
that's
okay, for instance, cool.
And you even called it Gaia too. You even used the word Gaia as well in the name.
Oh yeah,
fucking amazing.
It shouldn't be, because I was playing around with the United. This is when I was still, which I give you a lot of appreciation for, is to really be mindful of my words. So I was, over a year ago, as I was beginning to tune all of this in, I was exploring with different names, such as the United Federation of Earth, or the United Nations of Earth, the United States, because I knew it had to be inspired from the United States. But
let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
Have you studied law yet, in any way, shape, or form?
Not in a deep sense.
Okay.
Like something to develop.
As a sovereign, right, and considering we're making or working on creating alternative societies based on sovereignty for all, we ourselves, therefore, most importantly, need to understand that sovereignty entails the full understanding of, or at least as full and complete an understanding as we can gain in a lifetime of the law, right? And so it's really important that we, especially as forefathers of this stuff, path creators, if you will, definitely need to have a very deep understanding of the law. Now, I myself have only been studying it for I say going on 5 years, because it's 5 years ago that I really started studying it, but most of my study was just during that first year, and then it's been trickles since then. But in a nutshell, there are 3 books that I think you should read to gain a really good in-depth understanding of the history of law, the way things work right now, what private equity law is and how that works, and how it's always been that way since antiquity, and an understanding of basic terminologies, right? So the first thing I think you should research is it's called the Redemption Manual 5.0. And if you go to makefreedom.com, you can buy all of the various redemption manuals that they have. They have 6 books now available. It's now what used to be one book is now a 5-book series. And I don't know if they took their really long, huge textbook and broke that down into smaller books, and made it into specific subject matter, or if there's now 5 really huge books. I'm not entirely sure. But they have a 4-book series that you definitely need to get into, and then 2 other supplemental books that are probably beneficial to read. And that's definitely the best place to start when it comes to studying the law. Of all of the books that I have read, and I've read probably about 20 different books now on the law, the Redemption Manual is the absolute best rendition of the history of law, the way it works now, what private equity law is, how it's been around forever, and how it works, and how you can use it as a sovereign. After that, I would read my book, which is not the one you're reading now, but the one that I'll be publishing next, which is part 2 of the series, which is basically a history on law, which draws upon much of the knowledge and information from that book as well as from other sources. And then once you have that under your belt, then I would read The Occupation of Planet Earth, a Liberation Manual by Peter. And that's like the final piece of the puzzle, right? That takes all of the things from the Redemption Manual and all the things from my book and then pieces it all together into this whole overarching puzzle that you're like, oh, that's how it all fits together. I get it now. And with that, you will have a much clearer idea of what specific words mean, especially in legal terms, as well as what private equity law is, how it works, why it works the way it works, what a trust is, why it's so important, how to properly manage your affairs as a sovereign, and all of these things that are absolutely important and imperative to understand for the creation and co-creation of our alternative societies, which, our members themselves need to know and understand as well. So, we need to make it like everybody's homework, like you can't join until you've read these books, kind of a thing.
Part of the membership process. And definitely, that's one of the books that I started to dive into is Peter's book that you mentioned. And also Anna is, she bought a physical copy and have started it as well.
Anna did?
Yeah.
Really? Oh, good. Excellent. She especially needs to read the Redemption Manual series, though. Because James's book, Occupation of Planet Earth, is very esoteric, and it's kind of hard to understand if you don't already have a foundation in private equity law, which you gain from the Redemption Manual. The thing I like the most about the Redemption Manual is, unlike all of the other books on sovereignty out there, it doesn't have a fight the system attitude. It has a rise above the system attitude, which is the right way of doing it.
Yeah. And that's how we make the old structures obsolete, is to transcend and rise above.
Mm-hmm.
But so I also want to put it out there for anyone that might be tuning into this. What my vibe is with Kamiron is more of a co-creative exploration. So it's not as if we're doing an interview or a podcast. So I'm not asking questions that might be providing insights to the person watching this. It's just more so like I'm tuning in with you to play Legos. So it's not informative based on my end.
Yeah, and I think I'm starting to understand now that you're picking my brain so that you can use the information to start your own alternative society.
No, not to start. It's the reason why I reached out to you in the first place is as I told you, I'm really, it's part of my divine blueprint is to look out for my sacred divine partnerships. And I know when I reached out is because we're tuning into the same project. So now, yeah, as I bring up the analogy that you're like the Alexander Hamilton, you came up with the founding documents and the social economic system using those words to relate to what he did. So I had all of those, you could say, parameters, but I knew that there was someone out there holding that piece of the puzzle that fills out the content of these parameters. Parameters such as having this planetary, what I call governance back in a year ago when I first downloaded this.
I'm into it first, yeah.
Going all the way down to what we're doing here at the dental office to explain it as, okay, initially I was thinking a multi-stakeholder cooperative. Multi-stakeholder meaning you're having nested layers of membership from the employees, then becoming stewards of the business, and then that business becoming nested within another layer, which would be the like a health alliance sector, and that's nested to another layer of the community having stewardship of the dental practice. So you can see as I'm climbing higher and higher and then forming it to the planetary level. So that's how I eventually then came and created those design mock-ups of having the social economic platform to not only facilitate and create and launch different businesses within our community to form our own network, but to do it planetary wide and connect it all together. So it's all the same, but of course you have the blueprint. You have like the actual, as you were saying, that you're like the originator and I'm the designer. So it's not taking inspiration and running away with it. It's I've already have been tuned into this. So this is why we are having this conversation. You know.
Gotcha.
But I am curious.
So let me ask you: is your hope to co-create an alternative society together with me? Because we have basically the same idea.
Dude, that's my main question when we started off this jam out today was I wanted to get to the fluffy stuff. Like, do you feel it intuitively? Let's say you met if that girl in New Zealand is your twin flame. Are you like, how do you, that feeling, that knowing, and try to apply that, and whoever, not me, it could be anybody else, whoever approaches you, let's say it's a dude that you're collaborating with to create that digital platform. Like, do you have that knowing that, okay, we're meant to do this dance? So that's why I asked you that question.
Oh yeah, I feel people's vibes, and as long as I can see you and hear you, I can get a sense of that vibe. That's why I prefer to do video chats rather than just talk over the phone or just through the written word, text messaging, Skyping, whatever, which, are fine for moving things along. But, every now and then I like to have these video chats because this is how I really get to feel you out, right? I'm an empath, right? I can really feel people, right? Especially when I can see them and hear them. It doesn't matter if you're, halfway around the world. If I can see you and I can hear you, I can feel your fucking vibe, right? And that tells me everything I need to know, right? When I feel your vibration, I know everything I need to know about you. I don't need to know the details of your history or the details of the way you live your life right now. If I can sense your vibration, I know whether or not I can get along with you. I know whether or not we're on the same page. And yes, we might have some verbal misunderstandings with each other, but if we're in the right vibe, I can be like, yeah, well, it doesn't matter. He'll figure out what I mean eventually, Yeah. Or, and when I have misunderstandings with them, I imagine they feel the same way towards me, because we have that similar vibe, that similar resonance, right? We're in harmony. So even if we misunderstand each other, that's okay, because we can still play as a good team member.
Yeah. And to answer your question, that that has been my main curiosity as I'm diving deeper into, as I said, surrendering to what wants to emerge, right? So that could be surrendering to large pieces that I've gathered, but knowing that I'm down to do that if everything's in alignment. So that's why I asked you, how do you feel internally? Because I'm all about the divine plan and manifesting our divine blueprint and in service, So
Well, I'll tell you this much: if our roles were reversed and I was the one in your shoes and you were the one in my shoes, and I finally found somebody that had the whole big picture, what I was looking for, basically, and they already did all the legwork to figure that shit out, I'd be like, yeah, let's use this. This is what I've been looking for. But our roles aren't reversed. I'm in the one in the shoes of where I did 20 years of research, bouncing around from different idea to different idea, because every idea had a part of what I wanted, but not the whole thing that I wanted. And so, I went to the length of grabbing different pieces from all these different sources and putting them together to create the big puzzle that I now have. So, if that resonates with you to the point where it's like, yeah, that's what I've been looking for, then fucking awesome. And if not, what pieces of that work for you, and what doesn't work for you and why.
And then if we are meant to do this dance, then we could go into that co-creative process and up-level any of that. If I were to be feeling anything that could be better, for instance, but then having that dynamic where we are jamming it out. And
that's the beautiful thing, since we are in resonance, even when you come up with ideas that challenge my ideas of what I've already established, it doesn't make me cringe. It doesn't make me get proud or offensive. It makes me take them into consideration, like, I didn't consider that before, but you're in resonance with me. So, and you're having this idea and you're bringing it to my attention. So I should probably consider this and see if it's worth integrating, So, whereas, when I'm in conversation with somebody that I'm not in resonance with and they're challenging me, my total reaction to them is fuck off. If you don't like it, fuck off. Go somewhere else that has something you like.
Yeah, 100%. So it's our ability then, if we are, I don't want to use the word destined, but I do at the same time, because I have a high standard for co-creation, because co-creation is that standard that that we would shift from I to capital We, capital Our, right? Like being able to do that is, you could say, that level of embodiment. Because as we said before, using our soul origins, which you resonate with when we talk about the blueprinter group, and you aligning with the subgroup of that, which is the originator. And then let's say I'm like the technician or designer. You put it out there in your book at the end, the action call. Because my main driver before I read with you was, we got to fucking create an alternative United Nations that is the transcendent expression. So that was the main parallel. So then when I read this,
not just creating an alternative society, but an alternative global society, you're saying, was the okay, cool.
Planetary. But as we know, with the ascending timeline, we are emerging into a galactic society. So it's to co-create our own version and not the negative alien and global elite version. So it will become not just planetary, but galactic, and having that level of ambassadorship and council that integrates with interstellar nations and civilizations, right? And but when you say, all right, so right now we need business owners that are needed to get it going, and I mean, I already knew when I read that, okay, we're doing like the whole Patan thing. Like 20 years you've been in research development. All right, pass it on, because I have the next phase of the blueprint to anchor it down. In phases, of course. It's not like
Naturally, yeah.
we're gonna be like Kanye West. We're gonna earn our right to be to have any kind of partnership that we want. That's like Kanye West level. But that's because he's produced so many hits and so many creative ventures that he has put himself in a position to be magnetic and allow those opportunities to come to him, right? So we're going to do that same.
Well, that's just a mindset, really. I mean, you don't have to be at a certain level of success for that to happen, right? You get to a certain level of success because you gain the mindset to become magnetic in and of itself. Like, for example, I was practicing a very specific mental practice the day that you contacted me. And I know that you contacted me because I was practicing that certain mindset of attracting people that I need to move forward with this venture, right? And then you contacted me and we started moving forward. We made progress. And then I came into contact shortly thereafter with Modern Masters, John Lund from Modern Masters, and started talking with him and integrating into Modern Masters and collaborating with them as well. So that law of attraction is what that is, right? And that's all based on your mindset, right? Which is something a lot of people don't necessarily understand. So if you don't mind, I'm going to talk a little bit about the law of attraction for a moment, because it is a natural law. Huh?
You said this is for people that are watching?
Yes. So, like there's books out there like The Secret, for example. That's the most notorious one. And I say notorious because it's probably the book that sold the most amount of copies ever on the subject of the law of attraction. But it's also probably the absolute worst book you could possibly read on the law of attraction. And that's because it's so oversimplified, it really doesn't explain anything about how it actually works, right? It's more just new age, naive, positive thinking bullshit, really, that actually makes your reality worse because you're not accepting the negative, right? Which is a very important part of the process. Now, the law of attraction in and of itself, right? And then throughout history, there have been many authors that have described it as a 2-step process, a 3-step process, a 4-step process. I've come to discover it's actually a 5-step process. So here's how it originally started, and this was back in the day of Napoleon Hill, who wrote the book Think and Grow Rich, as well as the book The Laws of Success, which is the original version of that. He described it as a 3-step process, or there's 3 aspects of the mind that are at play, right? So you have your conscious awareness, and you have your subconscious awareness, and then you have the collective unconscious, right? And I'm not even sure he got into the collective unconscious. That's kind of just the bit that I throw into it, I suppose, in my interpretation of it. But basically, as Carnegie was mentioning to him, right, the mind works in so much that the conscious mind, the one that you use to think with, programs the subconscious mind, right? And the subconscious mind is what dictates your actions and behaviors in life. And those actions and behaviors are what attract people, circumstances, objects of interest to you, right? Based on what that mental program has been programmed to do, right? And so that's how it all started, was you have to program your subconscious mind in order to program yourself with certain habits in order to attract yourself to the right circumstances, people, places, things, and times. But then somebody, realized that, okay, this could be broken down into a 4-step system where your thoughts are what do the programming, right? And the thoughts that you have the most often program your mind. So program your habits. Your habits dictate your actions. That's step 3. And your actions determine your circumstances. That's step 4, right? The problem is the circuit isn't yet complete, right? Everybody thinks that by changing one of these 4 things, they can change their emotional state, right? If you're perpetually unhappy, and you've read any of these books, you might be under the interpretation that all I have to do is change my circumstance to change my emotion. And in order to change my circumstance, you might be under the impression that I have to change my actions and behaviors. And if you studied enough, you might be under the impression that you have to change your mental programs in order to change your actions and behaviors. And if you've studied enough, you understand that you have to change your thoughts in order to change your mental programs, in order to change your action behaviors, in order to change your circumstances, in order to change your emotions. But that's still backwards thinking, okay? Because where do the thoughts come from? Step 1. The thoughts come from your emotions, right? Emotions don't come from your thoughts. They don't come from your programs. They don't come from your actions, and they don't come from your circumstances, right? Your circumstances do cause you to feel emotions, yes, but they only cause you to feel the emotion that started the cycle in the first place as a way of reinforcing the cycle to keep it going, right? Because this is the way the law of nature works. Once a cycle is initiated, it wants to keep going, right? It wants to perpetuate itself, right? The only way to change the cycle is to change that which starts the cycle. And the cycle doesn't start with circumstances. It doesn't start with actions. It doesn't start with habits. It doesn't start with thoughts. It starts with emotions. When you change your emotions, you change the thoughts that you have the most often. And therefore you change the habits you program. And therefore you change your habitual actions and behaviors, and therefore you thus change your circumstances, which now reconfirm the new emotion that initiated the cycle. Okay? This is how the law of attraction really works. The mindset begins with the proper emotion, right? Now let's talk about emotions for a bit. You're going to have circumstances, or you're going to make realizations as you learn about things in reality, such as pedophilia or government corruption or international business corruption or whatever the case may be, that are going to make you feel negative emotions, okay? That doesn't necessarily mean that it's part of a cycle of negative emotions, right? You should know what's part of a cycle and what's just something out there that's causing a negative emotion, right? You should be able to discern that difference within yourself, right? These negative emotions are there to tell you what you don't like so that you can work to change them, right? But you can't change them by continuing to feel that negative emotion over and over again, right? When you focus on that negative emotion and you tune into the thoughts that are associated with that negative emotion and you program your mind with those thoughts, and therefore behave on those thoughts, then you keep creating that circumstance now, right? And that's what makes the law of attraction so difficult to master, right? The negative emotion is there to tell us what we want to change. Once we know what we want to change, we have to figure out how to change it, right? In order to figure out how to change it, we have to tap into our positive emotions and use those positive emotions to help us find solutions. And use those solutions, right? Once we have that positive emotion going on, we can use our thinking process within the realm of positive emotion to find solutions, to reprogram our habits, to reprogram our actions, to change our circumstances. That's the proper use of the law of attraction. It all starts with your emotional mindset.
Drop in knowledge. For those who are tuning in, take notes from Mystic Freeman, Professor Freeman, Philosopher Freeman.
Yes, sir.
Thanks for dropping that. It was that deep and powerful knowledge. So going back to when we're talking about the whole Kanye West analogy, it's that not only are we creating the planetary organization, but we are also creating our nations and therefore organism. The different businesses and organizations are going to create that nation. So that's going to be the first phase. That's how I see it, at least. And then as we continue doing our thing, we'll join alliances. And for those in alignment, we will already be experimenting and integrating this template, this blueprint, so that we then magnetize other alliances. So it's not, at least for me, not the approach of going out to others to form alliances, is we're gonna, create dope shit and do our own. And then from there, it's gonna be magnetic to those other communities and businesses that who are inspired and want to be a part of the administrative council. Not only that, but you have the synergy of consciousness, but the ability to steward resources and facilitate to those areas, and then having that council and administrative structure to do so. It doesn't get, and all of that's aligned to cosmic natural law, so it's like, it's a no-brainer, right?
There's just one correction I would like to make, which is while the businesses are the local level, it's probably not going to be able to start by creating the states and provinces, and then those bioregions, and then the national level bioregions, and then the international council. It's probably more than likely going to have to work the other way around, because there's the few of us that start. Like, for example, you're all the way over in Texas. Modern Masters is based out in, I can't remember, it's either California now, or they're in Iowa or Idaho or something like that. I think it's Iowa or Idaho. I'm in Connecticut, right? And the next person to join might be from Germany, and then the next person from France, and the next person from Japan. Like, who the fuck knows, right? And with these few people scattered all around the world, we're probably just going to have to create the international layer of organization first. And then as we grow in our locations and we have enough people to establish a cosmological council or a multiverse council, which take at least, 3 members, right? So there have to be at least 3 states, right? If, let's just use the US, for example, there have to be at least 3 states involved in order to create the national council. And then in order to create the multiverse council at the state level, there have to be at least 3 organizations, right? Got to have at least 3 people, right? To establish something, because 3 is where you get synergy from, right? So until we have the capacity to actually expand within the nations and create those councils at the national and provincial level, we're going to have to start with the international council and then work our way inwards. And that's actually the same as the creation of the universe, right? If you try to piece together like how the process of creation works in the universe, well, it works its way from the outside in and then remanifests itself back from the inside out, right? So you have the universe that creates the galactic cluster cores, which spit out the galactic cores, which spit out the stars, right? Which spit out the planets, which now create their ecosystems and their organisms upon themselves, and which then create the sentient organisms that live upon those planets and grow as a consciousness, which as they grow in consciousness, they grow back to that planetary level, and then back to that solar system level, and then back to that galactic level until they've unified with the entire universe all over again, right? So creation happens from the outside in, and then manifestation happens from the inside back out, which is exactly how the meritocracy is designed to operate too. It's this constant in-out relationship.
Yeah, and that's what makes it truly holographic. So it's that micro to macro ability. So when I talk about, let's say on my end, as we're anchoring down Cassiopeia in phases, not only are we going to provide the template, let's say for just a holistic dental practice, to be able to fractal out into, let's say, a tribe out in Colorado who want to anchor their First Nation. So you would have the organism being able to be fractaled, and then also now establishing things at the bioregional level, right? Because now you have two nations that are forming with its own organisms that are fractaling out from each nation state. So let's say 10 other organisms that will power up each nation state. We could do that simultaneously. So if we just have two right there, that we already, as you're saying, we started from the local nation level and then bioregion, and now we're pretty much, well, depending on how you want to measure the bioregion. But then let's say another Germany, as in your example, becomes inspired, then that's already operating at a planetary council of light level. So it's that.
Well, the other side of the coin is, I mean, it took me a long time to figure this out, because how do we expand the global society so that we're maintaining unification across the entire globe, right? And when we're starting with, you know, a few people scattered around the world, a few organizations or organisms scattered around the world, but how do we remain unified if they all have their own different council for their region, right? And who's participating in the council for Germany if there's only two organizations in Germany versus the one organization in France and the 5 organizations in the US and the couple organizations in Australia, you know? In order to maintain that unification, we need to start with the International Council first, right? Because there's so few of us, we only need the one council for now anyways, right? We don't need to fractalize into these smaller councils until our own areas of the world grow to a point where, you know, we have too many members for all of us to now continue participating on the Council of Light. So we're going to create our own national layer of council, the Cosmological Council, and have just our cosmological core participate on the Council of Light, you know? But you don't need to do that until you have at least so many organizations in your area, right? And then, so let's just say that the first Cosmological Council is established in the United States. But each state that participates in that council only has one organization in it so far. So none of those states yet require their own multiverse council, right? So they all just participate themselves on their cosmological council, and one of them becomes the cosmological core that administrates on the Council of Light. But let's just say Texas becomes the first one to have 3 organizations in it. So Texas becomes the first one in the United States to establish its own multiverse council. And now instead of all 3 organizations in Texas participating on the Cosmological Council, one member of that becomes their multiverse council core, MCC, who participates on the Cosmological Council, and everybody else participates on their multiverse council. So, you know, it works its way from the outside in like that because we have so few members to start from. And that way we maintain unification across the entire globe as everything grows, growing from the inside out. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, it does. But at the same time, to gauge with the movement on the descending timeline, let's say for Texas, what we went through with the artificial storm, now having it physically be affected to where our essentials, what we are dependent on with the old structures, let's say for our utilities, our water, now we have to gauge and maintain that, be able to balance those moves so that it's really affecting our localized physical universe. So
our resources, yeah. Right.
As far as, yeah, I mean, I'm totally with you that the international level is going to be essential, and that's why it's through the use of technology as
Well, let me ask you a question. All right. When you're the only, let's just say for the next 3 or 4 years, you'll be the only organization in Texas that's part of Metagaiaes or Unified Gaia, whatever we end up calling it. Although I definitely have my heart set on Metagaiaes for many reasons. In any case, let's just say for the next several years, you're the only organization in Texas, right? And you don't want to move out of Texas because you're well established there. You got a strong customer base. You're successful. So you want to stay in Texas. But who else is there to participate on a local council with you? You're the only one. So your organization is the only local council that exists there, right? And you still have to, participate at some level on the international council, right? So as far as, the particular situation that's going on there, like when the government of your location, right, the Texas government, doesn't do its job properly, and therefore you end up losing electricity for a couple weeks, you're looking for a particular solution for that, which unfortunately we're not yet capable of providing, right? Because we don't yet have an electrical company within our own network to provide you with electricity in place of the government provided networks of Texas, right?
Yeah.
But here's an interesting thing. I have a friend. It's nice thing about authors is you become friends with authors, and then you become friends with their friends, and it's interesting how your network grows. So speaking of Michael Tellinger, I have a friend author who is friends with Michael Tellinger, and he's now trying to hook me up with Michael Tellinger to get me into contact with him as a viable way of helping me to build my prototype generator or electromagnetic vortex engine, the EVE, in order to build my wireless electric power plants, right? Which means eventually I'm going to have wireless electric power plants as an organization in our alternative society, and we will eventually be able to provide our own electricity and provide it wirelessly, no less. So, I mean, it's still going to be a process of expanding that throughout the world, and I don't know, where it's going to start or how fast it's going to expand, but it won't be accessible to everyone around the world for a while. It's going to take decades to properly expand it throughout the entire world, or maybe, a decade at the absolute least, a couple decades, 3 decades at the absolute most. But eventually, we'll have our own resource for electricity, and as time goes on for that, we're going to have to find ways and means of inducting or creating other organizations into our alternative society that provide other resources.
Yeah, 100%. And so I guess to finish conveying what I was expressing is this holographic consciousness, which is paradoxical. So when I'm talking about being really localized, that's simultaneously creating the ability to be macro. So this is to be creating things at the macro level. It's the micro.
Oh, macro. Okay.
Yeah. It's that ability to be micro, but then also create that effectiveness and the anchoring of things at the international planetary level. So, and as you said in your book, that it's going after these core elements, whether that's the core founding people and then the core organization, you already have the Council of Light formalized. So it's going to take off after that, after we experiment and prototype at that initial phase. So that's what I'm seeing on my end. And I'm going to show you a screenshot here of how I was mapping things out before weaving with you. But here I already changed the terminology, but that's the deepest that's the most change that I've created after coming across your work. But other than that, the milestones still stay the same. So as you can see in the screenshot, are you able to enlarge it?
Yep.
Okay.
I got it on full screen.
So when we talk about Cassiopeia, that's the beginning of prototyping and developing our own first unified nation or micronation, however you want to call it. And as we do that, this is where we go macro to the planetary. And this is where I like and resonate with having, and this is for organizational and administrative purposes, just like how the administrative council's core reasoning and purpose of existence is not for government. And that's the same for nations or sectors. It's not to, it's just to make things more effective. So at departments at the planetary level, such as in the health sector, in the education sector, in the technology and science, in environment, food and water, and architecture and urban development. So imagine at the planetary level creating these type of departments or organizations. Then we have the ability, such as the World Health Organization, as an example, to attract different organizations that will align with even just creating, let's say, the first nation of Cassiopeia, because who's going to build it, right? Are we going to hire some random architectural firm that's not in the new paradigm? So in this way,
could.
I mean, we could, but ideally it would be nice to already start having.
Oh, right. And once we have organizations in our society that are construction companies and home improvement companies, and we can use them instead of having to use others. But, like, for example, I'm a home improvement company, but I live all the way up here in Connecticut. I'm not going to come down to Florida just to build something for you. I mean, down to Texas just to build something just for you, I already have customers up here that are demanding my services, and they're right here. So, so we need to get construction workers from down in your area to, create their organizations in our alternative society. And, that's all part of, like, one of the primary functions of the council at first is going to be creating campaigns, right, for spreading awareness to other organizations in the local areas in which our organizations already exist, in order to get other organizations to join our society so that we can become more self-sufficient amongst ourselves, right, and grow from within, just like that. So that's one of our first priorities after establishing the Council of Light, is campaigning in our local areas to spread awareness and get more organizations to join us.
Yeah, and now that's how I see it being able to fractalize is, let's say, I always like to use the World Health Organization because we are, as I mentioned, our portal into all of this is through biological dentistry, therefore nested within holistic health and wellness, the entire sector. So let's say the alternative version of World Health Organization, we will have our own bioregional, or no, not bioregional, local hub that will be able to launch these different initiatives, projects, campaigns. And then doing that, we'll go through this creative process of hopefully galvanizing other like-minded organisms, right, that are at the local level. And then while still simultaneously at the planetary level. So you could say different fractals or branches or chapters. So imagine all the other sectors. So if it's, let's say when we create our own first phases of Cassiopeia, if there's not a construction company out there that is new paradigm, then we will go about and embody our entrepreneurship and create our own organism and through there galvanize those who are in alignment to, new Earth consciousness. And then you have that sector powered up, and then that could be planetary because you have the, World Architecture and Urban Design Organization, for instance. So that way, no matter where you are physically, let's say throughout this emerging co-creative process, all the sectors at the planetary level have different organisms that could fractal, you could say franchise, to seamlessly be able to scale and spread out to the different physical areas so that that project or task in developing these nations could be done as well. So, and that ties into what you're saying is launching campaigns, but to do it in an organized way, and that could be through the organizations of sectoral departments, because it makes things so efficient to have the ability to categorize, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We could, in order to run these campaigns, like, okay, so every single member on, the first international council that we ratify into existence is already running its own business, right? Which is why they're a member on the international council. So, it would be ridiculous to ask each one of them to go out and just, on their own time and campaign everything, when instead what we could do is coalesce our efforts together, create other organizations amongst ourselves that we now hire employees into, which as of yet are probably not even members of Metagaiaes, but nonetheless, we're paying them to do a job, right? And so they'll do it, and we can pay them to campaign for Metagaiaes to get more members so that, we're not doing it ourselves, right? And taking our time and ability away from running the businesses that we already run, right? But we're just adding one more business that we run and setting up a management system so that it can more or less, for the most part, manage itself, where we just kind of set certain goals and milestones for them to achieve and let them figure out how to achieve it.
Yeah, and that's the importance of having a holographic organizational operating system, whether that's...
And in doing so, we're training those new employees how to operate the meritocracy way, which is going to sooner or later make them want to join our society as a member and maybe start their own organization.
Yeah, exactly. So imagine
that in and of itself is a campaign.
Right. And I mean, essentially, you could say, to simply put it, we're building a one badass venture builder or startup studio, but then also like a nation builder, incubator, accelerator, whatever you want to call it.
That reminds me. One of the first organizations that we will have to develop amongst each other is an organization that basically works in the same capacity as light leadership or, the holacracy, where the organization has the function or service of helping new organizations develop themselves into a meritocracy, right? Helping them to understand how the meritocracy operates and set their business up as a meritocracy or reorganize their existing business into a meritocracy so they can join Metagaiaes, et cetera, et cetera. And if light leadership joins with us, they have that piece of the puzzle because that's what they already do, right? So if they joined with us on Metagaiaes, then they could become that organization, right, that serves that function and purpose. So that would be really cool if they joined us.
Dude, so that's another synchronicity, man. I mean, it's fucking like in the stars when we're jamming out. So I hope you feel it and see it, because I asked you that question and you asked me that question. How I feel about all of this. If we're meant to be co-creating an alternative society together, that's so this is another slide.
Well, I'm pretty sure we are supposed to be. I get the right vibe from you.
This is another slide, and this is, you could say, the core nucleus, the mothership let's say you have Metagaiaes or Unified Gaia, at the central administrative level, this is how it will obtain value streams. And one of them, and this is what you were talking about with your, when you talk about like leadership and having an organization that serves as a consulting type level status to onboard and infuse this crystalline organizational DNA into existing organizations. So you can see that's one of the value streams that I have marked there. Consultative development. So you can say Metagaiaes or Unified Gaia, the nucleus, the mothership, would be able to be self-regenerative in these different value streams that are coming in from outside and into the main central hub. And one of them is, yes, having consulting abilities, but it doesn't have to be the central nucleus only. So imagine the planetary sectoral departments having the same value streams. And that's similar to the United Nations and their specialized agencies. They have the value streams coming in the same way, the same methods. So consulting could be part of the health and wellness planetary department to onboard health organisms with meritocracy and this new operating system, you see?
Okay. I'm kind of confused when I look at this pictographic.
I mean, the main thing I wanted you to focus on is a consultative development value stream that's coming into the nucleus. So imagine right now, you and I tomorrow are going to approach an organization that is aligned to meritocracy. Then we would charge consulting fees, and that will go to the main central hub.
Right. Yeah.
Hub is able to sustain itself, and that's one of the ways it will do that. You see?
You mean so like each one of these different departments, if you will, is funneling their profits into the center between them all?
Okay, so this diagram, all of the components, just think of it as ways to make money, ways for the mothership, the central nucleus, to make money. And that is through having a consulting functionality or education and advocacy, the memberships from the Unified Nations.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Why does it have to make money?
Well, I'm saying think about transitional too. That's why I'm saying tomorrow, right?
All right, so let me expand upon why I'm asking that question. Because, I've thought about this before when I was creating the international councils for Metagaiaes. Do they need to have a paycheck for being on, one of the councils? Is there any reason for which the councils themselves need to generate an income or make money? The answer I finally received was no, they don't, because the members of the councils are members of those councils because they're already managers or business owners of a particular organization, and they're already making money, right? And they're serving that position on the council as a responsibility to the fact that A, they're at a certain position in their organization, and B, they exist within our alternative society and are a sovereign member and therefore must do their due diligence in participating in the social administration. They're already getting paid though, right? Remember, the social administration, the administrators is a service being provided. It's a volunteer position, right? When governments were first created in the United States, they weren't supposed to be paid, right? That's a new thing. They eventually gave themselves a salary, right? And that didn't happen until after the Federal Reserve was initiated in 1933, or before that actually, but in 1933 is when the laws really began to change and politics really began to change. And that's when they started to pay themselves a salary, right? And how did they pay themselves that salary? Well, by implementing taxes, right? Which we didn't used to have, right? There was a time in the United States of America when we did not have taxes. And being a politician meant you were volunteering your time to fulfill that service towards society, right? Because that's what it is. It's a service. You're not a ruler, you're volunteering a service. And that's the same concept we're taking in Metagaiaes, where you're of a certain level of responsibility because you're a business owner or a certain level of management in an organization. You are responsible for fulfilling on a volunteer basis your sovereign duty to the administration. You're already getting paid by the company, the organization that you work for. What have you in need to make more money for fulfilling another service? That said, okay, there will be certain organizations that are direct extensions of the administrative councils. For example, the Treasury Department of the Administrative Council is going to, the Holobank is going to be a direct extension of that, right? And Holobank needs to have employees to work in it, and those employees have to get paid, right? So there has to be a way of paying those employees, right? Fortunately, Holobank has the ability to pay those employees outright. So that's not an issue. But then you have, for example, the Angel Chakra, the Peacekeeping Alliance, right? Which isn't necessarily tethered to any other organizations that currently exist, right? It's an organization unto itself, kind of like a military, except it's not a military because it doesn't focus on fighting. It focuses on transcendental meditation and self-defense. And, you know, their primary purpose is uplifting and maintaining the coherence of consciousness of the collective consciousness through transcendental meditation, and that's the service they're providing. And somehow we need to have a way of paying them, right? And without Holobank, right? And the only reason we would ever need to charge taxes or come up with another way of profiting the councils in order to pay these people is if Holobank doesn't exist first, right? Because if Holobank exists, then we go straight into our service-based free access economy, where everybody that serves a function in our society, right? That's a member of our society, such as the members of the Peacekeeping Alliance, the employees of Holobank, and members of the organizations that work in our alternative society in Metagaiaes, they can now, instead of receiving a paycheck from the business they work for, they get a card from Holobank, and they can create money on demand, right? So, you can use that debit card to purchase a $2 million house, or you can use it to purchase $200 of groceries, or you could use it to purchase a $2 candy bar. It really makes no difference because you're not moving money from one account to another. You're creating that money on demand.
Yeah, and so let's say from a transitional standpoint, let's say next month, we would still have to have an ability to form some sort of organizational structure to be able to take in different value streams, whether it's because we're not, let's say, if I have a job that I hate, right?
What do you mean by value streams? Hold on, I need to understand what you mean by value streams.
So you could say currencies, but energetic currencies. So that could be in the form of
And because Holobank doesn't currently exist, we're still using the currently existing currencies.
Right. So let's say philanthropic donations, right? We're going to still need to be able to take that in, which means we still have to have some sort of organizational structure, because it's not going to Holobank and all of these larger pillars aren't going to happen soon. So we have to be able
to actually just like Modern Masters is going to work on the development of our social media system, they are also immediately thereafter going to work on the development of Holobank.
Yeah, so they have the capacity to
They have the knowledge and skills to build that technology. So
with holochain.
he doesn't know. He's not yet familiar with holochain, but he is familiar with blockchain, and he's now coming to understand holographic organization thanks to learning about the meritocracy. And I've told him about holochain, and he's going to start looking into that. So
yeah. So let's say, all right, let's say there's a sooner timetable, but how, how, let's say to use you as an example, or myself, how do we get from what we're doing on a day-to-day to be self-sustaining and regenerative so that we could focus on the larger pillars without having the ability to take in these different currencies or methods of currencies or value streams is what I call it. Meaning, just like...
So at first, all right, so I'm not entirely sure yet I understand where you're trying to go, but I do think I understand where you're coming from. And I mean, so at first, like you're saying, there's all these different members from all around the world. We're all using different currencies. But the reality is, while we are working together to administrate our society, we're not really yet doing a whole lot of business amongst each other because we're so far away from each other. I mean, unless they really provide something that we have to offer and they have the ability to ship it over to us, right, as a product, but they can't provide their services. If they're in China and you're in Texas, I mean, it's kind of hard for them to offer services. It's hard for me to offer my services to you just because I'm in Connecticut and you're in Texas. So, there's not a whole lot of business going on between us yet, right? And most of the money that you're making is coming from people in Texas. And most of the money that you're spending is being spent in Texas, right? So it's still there. It's still, old paradigm money circulating around old paradigm economies. And it's even as we grow, right? And there's more of us in Texas, more of us in Connecticut, more of us in China, more of us in New Zealand, whatever. And we can actually start to do business amongst each other. That's cool. We're getting closer and closer to self-sustainability. But our primary profits, or our primary money making, isn't coming from each other yet. It's still coming from other people in Texas, Connecticut, Australia, whatever, and going back out into that economy, right? Because we still exist in their area, doing business with their people, and we're still spending money at their businesses, right? Because we don't have all the businesses we need in our area yet to, fulfill our own needs yet. We'll get to that point much, much later on. It's going to take a long time to get to that point. But with Holobank in play, right, once that finally does kick off, and hopefully sooner than later, because that's when our society will be able to grow much more rapidly, because it'll make it that much more affordable. With that, right, now we can play with any currency anywhere, anytime, right? We have our own currency called Holocoin, right, that we create on demand, right? But then using online technology, we are exchanging that currency for other currencies in real time, right? So when you swipe your Holobank card at CVS, who's not a member of Metagaiaes, to buy whatever, that's creating holocoins and then liquidly exchanging it in real time with USD, right, to deposit into their bank account. And so we're avoiding the need altogether to have to figure out how to work with all these different currencies, right, by creating this one system that deals with that for us, which is Holobank. And as for having to raise money, we only have to do that so long as Holobank doesn't exist. And even then, that's really only for the employees of the Angel Department, the Peacekeeping Alliance, right? Because somehow or another they have to get paid because they're not part of any other organization that's already bringing in profit from their own business. Every other member of every other council is also a member of a business that's already getting a paycheck from that business. So there's no need for us to bring in money in any other way.
Well, let's say, let's say whatever timetable that runway is. And if we were to only have 12 organisms in 12 different sectors in Texas, then we could, through each of those ventures, have venture contributions to the constellation in the meantime, so that the new...
You use a really nice term, venture contributions, but aren't you really talking about income tax?
Yeah, so taxes, but the thing is, so let's say with the income tax model, I wouldn't mind getting taxed if I could have a say in where that goes. That's the biggest difference.
Okay, yeah, and you do definitely a good point there because you are part of the council that decides how those funds are used.
Exactly. So it's a matter of blending in the whole, as we talk about capitalism, socialism, and unifying it. So it's not entirely the business to be individualistic. It's a part of a constellation.
So are you then talking about using those funds, like basically taxing ourselves or, venture contributions, as you call it, to then fund things like our version of the World Health Organization? Is that where you're going with this?
Yeah, so this is where
because that's an organization that otherwise doesn't make a profit. It's basically a non-profit organization, so it has to run based on contributions from elsewhere.
Yeah.
So is that what you're talking about? Is that where you're going with this?
Yeah, the overarching thing, at least transitionally, is to have the ability to be self-regenerative, so that all of the funds...
That does make a lot of sense, and I hadn't considered that before.
Yeah, so let's say when we're talking about the administrative council functions, well, what are they going to steward at this point? What resources? Why not have it be our own makings, so that, as in this example, 12 organisms contributing to the larger constellation, whether that's at the other various levels of council, they're going to have resources to facilitate to another tribe that's doing their own thing. And yeah, so we could practice facilitating resources, and not only from the venture contributions of the fractal organizations, but let's say any partnerships and alliances that we form. There's another way for resources to come into the constellation to steward, or huge donations, gifting, right? That will be funded into the constellation so that it could then facilitate resources to the different points that need it. So it would have, so basically giving the constellation many ways to steward and facilitate essential resources. So that could come in the form of what we think of taxing, but it's venture contribution, and that it's choice of how much you want to, let's say, for example.
See, the only reason that A, I never considered that before, and B, why that might rub a lot of people the wrong way, because anybody that's part of the sovereign movement understands, at least, when it comes to old paradigm governments, that income tax is theft, right? Now, yes, we as members of Metagaiaes and members of the councils get to decide, or at least have a vote on how that money, on how those contributions are used, what they go towards. But even then, it's like a steep loss of control to our own income, right? And it's not like we are personally choosing, I want my money to go to this organization, right? We're pooling it all into a center, and then we're deciding together how that money is going to be allotted to different things. the problem is every sovereign in the world, everyone that's actually gone the length of obtaining their sovereignty like I have, any idea that even resembles income tax is going to put a really bad taste in their mouth. You know, it's going to, they think of it as a form of slavery, right? And it's going to be hard to get through to them the idea that, well, yes, it's still like an income tax, but it's not an income tax because you actually get to have a deciding vote on how that's used. But I still don't see most sovereigns wanting to do that, you know.
So let's say sovereigns who have truly integrated the lower chakras so that they're taking care of any security and financial issues.
Now, on the flip side, they would have absolutely no problem saying, yes, I would donate, you know, X amount of my profits, so long as I get to decide I'm going to donate it to this organization, not that organization, not into the pool, but to that specific organization because I believe what they're doing. That would be different because now it's now they have full control over where that money is going. It's not decided by a majority vote.
Yeah, so there's different layers to this, right? So they could, let's say we're talking about tomorrow speaking, not farther down the timeline. So let's say tomorrow they have the ability to, as you said, be able to facilitate resources to an organization in the network or outside of it, or any layers of the council or administration to do it for them, type of thing. But it's more so, as you're saying, the sovereigns who have truly picked themselves up and done the shadow work and self-healing so that they are contributing their innate gifts and talents, which provides, I mean, we hate to use the word money, but we got to be realistic right now too, right?
Mm-hmm.
And as we know, as you talked about with the Saint Germain and having the that secret formula to having the financial system being used as good, which means there is going to be a financial system. So let's transmute that. And we have to transmute it by going within. So which means those who are going to be sovereigns embodying the entrepreneurship mindset, meaning that they could be co-creators of their reality and be empowered to truly do the groundwork and be able to make money. So you make money, and then therefore now having the ability to align with the planetary organization that could use those funds, aside from covering from your own needs and wants, of course, take care of the individual, but then also to make the whole
But
better.
I just don't think we should be having our organizations put their money into a central pool, right? We'd have to give them the choice of which organization they would like to donate their percentage of their profits to, because that's how we vote on which organizations stick around and get to do what they say they're going to do, because that's what's going to determine, like, that's how you're voting, by giving them your money, right?
Yeah.
And the more money they get, the more they can do what they want to do. And the more people giving them money, the more money they'll get to do what they got to do. The less money they get, well, you guess you don't have the votes, But putting it into a central pool where it's then distributed from there is going to raise way too many eyebrows amongst sovereigns. But let them decide where to send that money to themselves. Let them take that upon themselves and let that be your voting decision. I think we could manage to make that happen. But keep in mind, we're probably only going to have to do that for a very short period of time. Because if everything goes the way I think it's going to go, we'll probably have Holobank up and running in about 5 years.
Yeah, so that's why I always stress the key word of transitionary, the transitional piece, because tomorrow I want to wake up and be able to be of service to this plan without having to worry about my survival.
Right. And now imagine this. When Holobank is up and running, you no longer have to worry about how much profit your business is making, as long as it makes enough to pay your non-member employees, right? Because your non-member employees, and by that what I mean is the employees that you have that are not members of Metagaiaes, right? They're the ones that you have to actually pay out of the profits that you receive, right? All of your member employees, they get a holobank card along with you. You get a holobank card. You can create money on demand as much as you need, whenever you need to. So you don't have to worry about how much money you're making ever again. Which means your business itself doesn't have to make as much money to sustain itself anymore, because you only need to make enough for your inventory of supplies and your non-member employees. Which otherwise means if everything is still going as planned, you have a much higher profit margin because you don't need to pay yourself with it and you don't need to pay your member employees with it. So you have more money to go towards expanding your company, right? And that's, you don't even have to use it for that, because you can use your own holobank card to expand your company, as fast and as much as you want. So, it takes the burden off your shoulders entirely.
Yeah.
As soon as that becomes available. And then, then we definitely don't need paychecks for or salaries or whatever for the administrators on the councils, because you have a holocard.
Right. So it's all about, merging the two realities together in the present moment, because we're operating a business that is very grounded, you could say. So, I mean, yeah, it'd be awesome and it will happen, but it's the time, how we're going to get there, the timing and how we're going to get there, because we're still tomorrow going to take the current form of exchange to deliver our service. So we have to be really grounded at the same time, so that we could truly embody and create these massive projects,
Yeah.
Anyway.
Oh, and that's the other thing is, once Holobank exists, we don't need venture contributions for them anymore, because everyone that works in those organizations now has a holocard. And so they can just use that to pay for whatever they need as they go.
Yeah, and that's one of the items I'm looking to dig a lot deeper into, is the concept of the holobank. And I'm sure there's parallels, because there has to be you call it a social economic functionality to the constellation to power all of these new paradigm elements in. So I only showed that because we were talking about light leadership and having the ability for a consulting organization to onboard and train the organization operating system that's aligned to cosmic natural law to power up their organizations instead of starting from scratch, creating our own organisms, right? We're flipping existing ones into the new paradigm. Just like, and this is where we could experiment with forming some sort of initiative like a B Corp, where so many for-profits, nonprofits could be certified as a benefit corporation by meeting these certain criteria. Maybe creating the essential building blocks of, so let's say we have a chance to create an LLC, S Corp, a 501c3, why not, or benefit corporation? What if we throw unified holographic organization into the mix to choose from? And
you can call it whatever you want, but in the end, it has to operate in a certain way in order to legally avoid A, income tax jurisdiction to the IRS, and B, legal jurisdiction to the nation that you exist within, right? And in order to do that, you have to be operating as a private business. And there's only a very few ways of doing that legally, okay? And in my humble opinion, the absolute best way of, all right, so think of it this way. If you're going to use any kind of publicly registered company, go with the LLC. And the reason I say that is because the LLC itself is a what's known as a what's the technical term? Well, the non-technical term is a pass-through entity, right? So basically, when you form an LLC, the LLC itself is not taxed on its income, right? Unless you set it up to be taxed like a corporation, right? So don't do that. You set it up as an LLC and taxed as an LLC. And what that means is all the income tax passes through to the owner of the LLC, right? Now, if the owner of that LLC is you, the person, then you, the person, now have to pay income tax on the profits you make in that business. But, okay, if you make the owner of that LLC a natural law trust or a private business trust, right, or a tax-exempt nonprofit foundation or a unincorporated business association, right, or business organization, UBO, any one of those kinds of tax-exempt entities, okay, if that's the owner of the LLC, right, then the pass-through is going to a tax-exempt entity. So now the LLC does not have to pay any income tax whatsoever, right? However, because it's an LLC, it is still publicly registered with the state government and therefore the federal government, and is still liable to follow state and federal laws, which is why we want to try to avoid using LLCs anywhere we can, right? Because we want to establish our businesses in Metagaiaes, not in Texas, not in Connecticut, not in China, right? And if we create an LLC, we're establishing that business as a business in Texas, Connecticut, China, Australia, whatever the case may be. We don't want to do that, though. We want to establish our businesses in Metagaiaes. We don't need the LLC for that. We don't need the S Corp or the C Corp for that. We don't need the 501c3 for that, right? The only thing we need are unincorporated business organizations, right? Because that has nothing to do with anyone. And natural law trusts or private business trusts. That's all we need. That's all we need. And that keeps it private property outside of government jurisdiction. And that keeps it outside of IRS income tax jurisdiction.
Yeah, and that could be one of the core features of obtaining to be a, let's call it a holographic organization, metacratic organization, is to have to strive for this criteria, right? And that's how the B Corp could be so scalable, because anyone, they know certain metrics to reach for and they could qualify. It's the same thing as a holographic organization. Having it be a private business is one element. Having it have a holographic operating structure for the self-organizing capabilities of an organization, right? So that's two. And then it could be other blends of like community well-being and planetary and other things like that. Essentially, to think about how can we scale that model faster.
Well, that's why I chose using organizations, right? When I was creating the idea of how to organize Metagaiaes and how to turn it into a global society, and I came up with the idea for networks of businesses. This is how I came up with that. I knew that borders and boundaries weren't the answer. And I knew that Michael Tellinger was attempting to create an alternative society based on networks of towns, right? Now, the problem I immediately recognized with his network of towns is that it can take a very, very long time to get a single town to organize together to become a one small town initiative in his Ubuntu philosophy, to work towards the creation of his global network, right? So it takes a very long time to establish, a town as a hub in his alternative society. In our case, it takes a few days to a few weeks to establish a new organization, right? An organization can be created practically overnight. It can start employing people immediately, and it can start turning a profit immediately, right? So if we use the organization as our small town, right, we could rapidly grow to a global society throughout the world very easily, because we don't need boundaries, we don't need territories, borders or boundaries or territories, and we don't have to get so many people that live in a certain area to agree on a certain way of doing things in order to turn that into a hub, right? All we have to do is say, hey, I'm going to start this business, right? And I'll start it as, a small business. So I'm the only manager that has to participate on the council, and everybody else can be a non-member employee for now, right? And then as I expand, certain of those members that get promoted will have to become members, and we'll figure out who's going to be the members when we get to that, who's going to want to become the members, right? And we can figure that out as we expand, right? Um, and furthermore, in that way, we're using our businesses to educate all of these non-member employees in how the meritocracy works, how they can operate in self-sovereignty, right, as part of a holographically organized network administration. And we are providing them with education on that front so that they know that the choice exists, right, to join an alternative society and to live in sovereignty instead of slavery. And so we can affect a lot more people a lot faster as we get more and more organizations to join us. So this, of all the ideas I've come across, this has the most potential for rapid expansion.
And I'm looking, now that you're sharing all that, I think maybe if it's in alignment to merge those two concepts together, where we're talking about the formation of organizations nested into, let's say, Tellinger's concept of towns. But as we know, it's the organizations that make up the town, that creates the towns.
Well,
So
not in his case.
yeah,
He does it totally differently.
we're marrying the two, essentially, because the organizations, they also have to be nested in an organizational ecosystem. You could call that a nation or town. It has to be synergized. It's not like you could just have an organization here and an organization on this side of town. And like it has to be all. I mean, think about the Venus Project, right? Don't imagine all of those organisms that are creating the Venus community. It's not organisms that are outside of that, like that, just randomly located this area. It has to be nested together.
Well, I mean, so that's the problem with Michael Tellinger's approach, is they all have to be nested together. In our case, we don't need to be nested together in order to create an international society, right? We can be scattered all around the world and still be an international society. But eventually that nesting together will happen as we expand in our own locations.
Because
and we want that to happen as fast as possible, because we want to be able to do business amongst each other instead of, with the secular society.
You want to be able to change your environment, your living environment. You can't be operating in this organization and then living.
And we do that by getting other people in our local environments to join Metagaiaes as an organization.
Yeah, because the organizations is actually what creates these new nations or communities, right? But
well, like I said, the local community is the organization itself, right? That's the town, if you will.
But then at the same time, this one last thing, and then we're at the office, so we're gonna leave right now.
Okay.
But so, yeah, the organization, and here's one thing we could leave off is small businesses make up 99% of the economy, and the average size of a small business is 10 people, right?
Yep.
So that's not. I mean, when we're talking about fractaling so much, it's hard to facilitate resources when we just are organized in so much like layers when it comes to organizations. So it has to be nested within some sort of nation or community.
So are you saying we should have a town layer of councils on top of, I mean, eventually once we get to that point, instead of going from the state to the organization, we should have a layer of towns and cities in between organizations and state layer?
Oh, no. So I think with the model that you came up with, we could do that through this vision. We could do that through this model. So you have the organisms, the organizations, and then the community, state, province level is the new version of a nation, a micronation. Think of it like that, right? Because micronation,
Okay.
let's say, could have 200 to 500 people. Well, that's mainly of all the businesses that people are part of that make up that unified micronation. So that's still the state level. And then you already have the regional, but that will be bar-regional.
Are you still thinking in terms of borders and boundaries then? Because, like, for example, you referenced Michael Tellinger's Ubuntu One Small Town initiative and fusing that together with the meritocracy. But see, therein lies the problem that town functions based on its borders and boundaries, right? It separates itself from its state based on those borders and boundaries, and anybody that lives within those borders and boundaries now has to be a part of that town, right? Whereas by getting rid of the concept of borders and boundaries altogether and formulating our alternative society based on networks, purely networks of organizations, now it doesn't matter, like your location doesn't matter to your domicile, right? It doesn't matter where you live, you can still domicile in Metagaiaes, and it doesn't matter if somebody's around you, they can still be in Texas instead of Metagaiaes, right? So it gives everybody the ability to choose without having to change their location.
Yeah, absolutely. And then paradoxically, the distinct uniqueness of each territory is connected to the unique features of its ecoregion. So it's eco features, one, and then having the ability to have different cultural and mental unique expressions. And three, most importantly, as you say, is for the ability to administrate and organize more efficiently. So that's why it's important, as we talked about in the last dialogue, to correlate the boundaries to the ecoregions and not have it be territorial.
And you know what? I just, as you were saying that, I thought of another good reason as to why we would want to do that, which is that if we base our organizational criteria on the existing borders and boundaries, the governments of those borders and boundaries can basically say, you know what, your address is 123 North Street, Granby, Connecticut, USA, Metagaiaes. So you're still in our jurisdiction. But if we create a bioregion that has different borders and we give it a different name, now we're not saying 123 North Street, Granby, Connecticut, USA, Metagaiaes, right? We're saying 123 North Street, whatever the name of the bioregion is, Metagaiaes, right? So now they can't construe us as being in the jurisdiction of their government based on our address, because our address criteria is different. Which means we're going to have to immediately come up with our own mail carrier organization, package delivery organization that understands our address criteria.
Right. That's definitely an organism that's needed, and a planetary organism at that.
Which is probably why, historically speaking, you can't create a nation without first creating a postal service. Did you know that, legally speaking, you have to create a postal service before you can create a government? Without a postal service, the nation does not exist, legally speaking.
Interesting. All right, brother. So we're gonna head out and head back home. So I want to continue.
Alrighty.